Conform, and I hope you enjoy it, and I'll be back for Q&A after this. Shout numerous times. They were polite, but they just weren't interested. And there's a couple of reasons that may have been. We've had a bunch of people speculate. There was one lady who actually came from one of those communities. She said that they just probably wouldn't participate in telling a story like this. It's just not of importance to them. There's 100 years now since that agreement, and in the Mexican Constitution, there's a limit to any agreement a government can make. They cannot make anything over 100 years. That's a constitutional thing. And the communities down in Mexico may not want to draw any more attention to this right now. And so, yeah, that's a question you may have had. Where are the Mexican Mennonites in this story? There's a question right here.
Well, not a question, actually. I just moved near Steinbach, and there's a lot of people that are Mennonite have moved back from Paraguay and the other places. They have moved back to Canada. There's the children's children or whatever, but they went with the move, and now the children are coming back.
So the point was made that so many of them are coming back, which is very interesting. There's a whole side or story that comes after this.
Yeah.
What happened?
The next generation.
Many of them migrated seasonally. They come and they work in Canada, they work in the U.S., they go back. There's also been dramatic changes down there to the people around them. They're stuck with cartels. It's gotten the violence has increased. And of course, there's a lot of negative stories about those communities as well. CBC did a story about dramatization about the drug dealing and drug smuggling, that kind of thing. So that's maybe one of the reasons they also didn't want to participate. We were considering going down to Mexico to interview some Mexican scholars about their, studies regarding the Mennonite community, but COVID happened. So we went through 2 years of sort of trying to grind this together and put it together. So, any other questions? Thoughts? Gentlemen here?
I'm calling about the Mennonite settlement around Aylmer, Ontario.
Around where?
Aylmer, Ontario. You have the thought number?
Aylmer, Ontario.
Aylmer, okay.
And there's a weekly road-driven broadcast on the radio in this southern Manitoba about that. They do a lot of interviewing on that show every week. I'm wondering if anybody here knows something. I've never been to Aylmer. Like, what's going on there? Because they import a lot of help for farming from various places, Mexico or there.
Yeah, I bet that'd be a whole other evening to unpack the Mennonites and the whole sort of in the media. So I'm going to give you an assignment. Go to the BBC or go online, Google Mennonites in Mexico, BBC. They do a 1-hour documentary, which is very interesting. It looks at one of these communities more recently. And it's very interesting because the gentleman who they're focusing on has a phone, he has a smartphone. And him and his family have this little thing where they listen to music sometimes, and he uses it a lot. And until his brother comes driving down the road, and then he hides the phone. And it's interesting because he does not seem to understand what that BBC camera sitting in his kitchen means. That the whole world could see him, with this little technology that he's kind of sneakily using and hiding from people in his community. It's astounding. He, said that's one that I think also the BBC was kind of exploiting that situation because he also travels across to Bolivia with tens of thousands of dollars of cash on him. And the BBC is now showing if you see a Mennonite traveling, chances are they're moving and they're carrying all that cash on them, this whole family. It's very interesting. It's well worth watching. I thought that was not really cool of the BBC to do that. They're almost putting a target on these Mennonites when they're moving.
There's Mennonites in Mexico,
Chihuahua, yeah.
okay, and then there's Mennonites in Mexico 100 years, Mennonites in Mexico documentary, which one?
It'll be the BBC one. Just watch them all. Yeah, so initially I didn't want to do this because it didn't interest me, but the more I got into it, the more they sort of pressed me and sent me details. I I thought, you know what, this is a story worth telling. Gentlemen here?
Yeah, you see a lot of parallels during COVID time between government control and the way people are resisting that specifically to Mennonites. I definitely.
To a certain degree, yeah. I know it was pointed out the other night that the lines for those older groups in some of southern Manitoba that were connected to this story, which I found really interesting. They have a mistrust for governments, probably more so than some of the other community. Pardon me? Yeah, well, I understand, you know, this is in the history, so, but we were going to call this betrayal initially, but everyone who worked on it and studied this felt that it was more of a conform, and that, you know, I think we reinforced that government wasn't trying to trap the Mennonites, and the Mennonites weren't trying to, like, you know, betray the agreement they had signed. It was a misunderstanding on both sides that led to this whole sort of situation. The gentleman here.
I really appreciate the introduction. I think the first 15, 20 minutes was a very good, short, succinct, where did we come from? And for somebody that doesn't know anything, for them just to watch the first 10, 20 minutes, it would be fantastic to understand their roots, if they have any interest in Mennonites. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, and that story of privilegium and sort of them moving as a cohesive community is really interesting. James Urey, who's one of the foremost authorities of Mennonites, who's not a Mennonite, he actually studied the Mennonites. He did his PhD and all his work on it because it was a cohesive group that sort of moved through history that he found really unique. And I'm sure some people in the room here know that in James Urey. But you start to see that pattern and these patterns moving throughout. Conrad states that the Mennonite Heritage Archives says it's a people on the move. So even though we've been here for a while in Manitoba, yeah, our history has moved. Go ahead.
Does anybody here, I got two questions. Does anybody here know how many different kinds of Mennonite states there is now? And also the second question is, what is today's definition of Mennonite?
That's really interesting because the BBC documentary says these are Mennonites, and it's portraying, you know, this group, very low technology, dressed in black in Mexico, and they never established that there's other branches and that this really is not the best way to define a Mennonite in the global sphere. I don't know, I can't answer that. Anybody can answer that? How many different branches of Mennonites are there? Somebody in the back.
I don't know how many there are, but this story is my family totally, like the immigration from Europe to here in the 1870s, that's when my family came, and they had some Mennonites that moved from Manitoba to Saskatchewan. That was my dad's family. But the migration to Mexico, we never left to Mexico, so you know it stops there. But my mom was a Summerfelder, like they said, Summerfelder. My dad was a Rhinelander. They got Furthalder. They got they got the MBs. They got the GCs. They got all sorts.
I remember a Jewish gentleman asked how many different factions of the Jewish community there, and he says, well, it's like everybody else. It's like the Catholics and all the other denominations. You can splinter and splinter and splinter. There's far right, far left, there's radical, there's all kinds. It's kind of like the Mennonite community in many ways, too. It's hard to really define. I mean, we do have some definitions, but it's kind of, you go from a place in Mexico and then you go to more localized sort of Mennonites living in the cities, that kind of thing.
Well, I don't know how many, but I have heard that if you consider the Mennonite faith and not the ethnicity, that the average Mennonite would be a black African woman.
Or Asian as well, so, yeah, and that's something that, you know, for our generation or an older generation, it's hard to understand, but that's a result of all the missions.
One more question. How come you focused on the Mennonite migration, and even though at the exact same time the huge group went to Paraguay?
That was the focus of the documentary that the Plant Foundation wanted to do. I mean, yeah, the Paraguay story is also very interesting, and that was hard too, so.
That was already done, and then they fell out, Paraguay.
To a certain degree, when they lost, yeah.
That was already done, I didn't hear what you said after that.
And then they fell out, called.
Then they what?
Well, and that's the Ruslanders primarily.
And then they were and then they fell out. There's a movie about Ruslanders to Paraguay.
Thank you for coming. Any other questions there?
We're very aware of our
unique story. And it's 100 years ago, so it probably was a good thing that we did tell this. I know my personal family, they were all Ruslanders. So they came in right behind this group that was leaving, and my grandfather always told the story that that was completely different mindset, you know.
I recently learned that two of my great uncles that were in that group and came from the Rhinelander portion of Mennonite Migration. And my grandfather was one of the brothers that moved to Paraguay at that time. And two of them went to Mexico.
So did they go to Mexico and then Paraguay, or went straight to Paraguay?
So two stayed in Mexico, so there's many Peters in Mexico.
And so many of that group went to Bolivia and beyond, but I think they're running out of places they can move to. I think they will, it's almost like they're chasing the sun, or they're running from the sun. I think it's inevitable that they will be eventually, as is already shown in Mexico, technology catches up, whether it's for trade or economy, or just in general listening to iTunes with your kids in the kitchen when your brother's not driving down the road.
So they really have the right idea, because really that's what, in this day and age, maybe that's what we should be doing, but not move. But if we all stood the ground, is what they're standing, not the old-fashioned stuff, but the fact that now you don't even have religion in schools anymore, never mind whatever. So they kind of have the right idea, how far do you push it, how far do you move?
Do you have rubber on your tires or steel?
What does that mean? No,
Oh, yeah.
that's what I mean.
Yeah, exactly.
That's for old stuff, and that's what it's Hutterite as well, and I don't know the difference between Mennonite, Hutterite, and Amish.
That's another evening.
You should do a documentary on that. That would be very interesting, because nobody knows the difference, except maybe the Mennonites.
Yeah, and it's interesting in pop culture how Mennonites have now gotten in there, in a negative way, but also the Amish as well. It's kind of an interesting portrayal that they all get, as these quite sort of backwards people. But I'm going to leave it at that, and thank you for coming. Oh, you can vote. If you really like it, it's a 1. It's not quite your deal, it's a 4. Correct? Sorry. I think number 1. So if you really like it,